All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of The Less Stressed Life, where we teach exhausted and burnt out adults the truth about adrenal fatigue so that we can get them their health back quickly. And this is always a pleasure to be joined by a client of ours that we've had some really successful outcomes. And this has been the same with Guss, who's had some major health challenges along the way. However, we've been able to customize a recovery strategy around his unique health challenges and really get some major wins. And we want to share with you Guss's journey today. So Guss, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Joel.
Yeah, so I was just looking through our initial onset of care, and that goes back as early as November 2018. Now, that doesn't mean we necessarily saw you every single month over that course of time, but ultimately, when you presented and reached out to us, you had a number of health challenges that you were dealing with. When I look at some of the forms that you filled out, insomnia was a huge one, which you actually had forgotten about, as we talked about a little earlier, brain fog, bloating, gastric pains. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in your story? And you said you'd been dealing with this for about 10 years. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you were dealing with prior to starting with us, Guss?
Yeah, I think a lot of it started really once I got married about 14 years ago, and I had some food poisoning in that rough early marriage period, and then I ended up going overseas on a couple of trips, and my gut really started to suffer. I felt bloating, and I also just noticed that I was putting on weight without the ability to take it off, and I didn't notice I was really doing anything specifically different to do that. And then I also noticed the fatigue started setting in. So it was like I was just gradually getting worse. You know, it wasn't like an immediate, although the food poisoning, I felt that was a step down, and I felt constipation at that point, and it never really went away, and I was doing all kinds of things to try to get my bowels or my bowel movements going. And it was really a struggle over the years. And I'm a natural person. So I really, somewhere along the line, I got out of the medical world and I started doing natural. And I'm really reluctant to go to that world. So I was doing a lot of natural things. But you'd have some success, but you weren't really like nailing it. And so, gradually I almost lost the ability to sleep at all. I mean, I think I get about 3 to 4 hours of night early in the evening, and about 3 o'clock I'd wake up and I'd be awake for a lot. I'd be awake most of the morning with very light sleeping and then up again. And I ended up doing some things in the middle of the night as hobbies that really were productive, but it was like I'd rather be sleeping, and so that was something that we were just talking about has changed dramatically. Has been a big change. In fact, this morning again, it was 7 o'clock, the alarm was going off, and I was like, I have to get out of bed now. And that was never the case. So 7 o'clock is a pretty normal time for most people to get out of bed, but I'd be easily up at 3 or 4 in the morning and just almost cursing the clock, like, I'm not going to get back to sleep. What am I going to do? And I'd be wide awake. You get that feeling of like, yeah, I'm not at all sleeping, So gradually though, what led me to work with you is I'd worked with several practitioners. I don't know when it really started in earnest. I know I needed help, but I would get little pieces of it, it seemed like, but it really didn't seem like it was all coming together. And I think I was even feeling like maybe I was having some heart issues, although I'm not sure that was really the case. I feel like there was something with my metabolism that really had gotten stuck and I couldn't switch over. I guess most of your audience is going to know what ketosis is. If they're in your sphere, then they probably know that as your body is switching over to ketosis from more the sugar side of the burning, I couldn't get there, and I would just crash, and I was baffled by that. And so I think I was looking for, I didn't know if it was adrenal fatigue. I know you deal a lot with adrenal fatigue, and like a lot of people, you hear things and you're like, yeah, my adrenals don't seem to be working. Maybe that's it. So I reached out to you, and then we started working together in 2018. I noticed improvement pretty much I can't say I'm the best patient. I mean, we didn't meet all the time, right? We met pretty infrequently, every 3, 6 months. Um, and I would sort of wing it for a while. And I would say gradually I've been getting better, with a little bit of the stress setback this last fall or early spring. But then we kind of started fine tuning my supplements, and I really feel like, again, it's like, I don't know if I'm churning out, getting better, like getting stuff out of my system, but yeah, I do gradually feel like things are getting better. Again, I doing crazy things at night. I used to not do anything in the evening. I was a blob on the couch, I'd be 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I was out of energy, and I was going to sit on the couch and, play videos. And I have 5 kids. So, watching my kids grow up and not being able to go out and do things with them, or, my daughter's always wanting to go ride her bike, or teach the kids basketball or whatever, I wasn't able to do any of that stuff because it's hard to describe. Like, you don't have the ability to do it. You're just literally a blob. And I kind of look at it as like aging, you're like, I'm getting old, and I'm not that old, but I'm like those old people who can't get off the chair, and they just sit there all day staring at a TV. And I don't want to be that person. I want to live to 100, and I want to have energy up until the end, or it's not worth it. Right. So, last night I was up again till, I know I was active until about 9 without really a big drop in energy, which is, for most people, it's not a big deal. But when you lose it and you realize there's something going on causing it, then you need to figure it out. How's that?
No, listen, that's a good stroll. I mean, ultimately, I'm looking at some of the notes, and I know, like, first and foremost, if you're not sleeping, everything revolves around getting good quality sleep to recharge your battery. It's like a battery that is a rechargeable battery that you didn't charge fully the first time around. So every time you put it in use, it never completely fully holds its charge. But when I look at your initial notes, one of the things you mentioned was that you were trying the keto and that it had impacted you really badly. And I asked you about, were you tracking, were you looking at your numbers? And I think that's a big lesson for a lot of people, because they hear about, hey, maybe keto will make me feel better. I do have a massive sugar craving. My blood sugar feels like it goes up and down. And then I feel like shaky, lightheaded, and jittery. And if I don't have food immediately available, then I'm going to crash. And one of the very first things that we talked about, Guss, was, hey, are you actually taking your glucose levels or your ketone levels? And I was surprised that you hadn't, because I think I don't know so much malpractice, but if a provider suggests that you try a particular diet and you don't look at the dashboard, if you will, like if you're a pilot and you're flying a plane, and you're not looking at your coordinates, how do you know how good of a job you're doing? So that was one of the first things. Do you remember that at all, or what kind of ahas you had from that?
Well, I never went into ketosis. I never once got it. You know what I mean? I'd be, so your body does a lot of weird things when it gets stuck without sugar. And you'll notice as you're winding down, it's like you're trying to start the car and all it does is grind and you're not going to move. So if 8 to 12 hours after stopping eating goes by and you have no ketones, you're low, you're just not you're going to feel it. You're going to feel horrible. And then you're going to crave sugar, because at least I did, I was craving sugar to try to get the engine started again because the ketones weren't happening. So, and it wasn't the lack of trying. I mean, it was months and months and months and months of trying to do that where it just didn't seem to be working.
Yeah. And that's where it requires, okay, well, it's good that we're testing and we're seeing I'm not getting there, but then it becomes, why am I not getting there? And that's where the functional approaches or the customization comes into play. And one of the first things we did was do a nutrigenomic or DNA test to get some insights as what are some of your potentials that could be creating inflammation. Because I look at it as, okay, if you're having sugar cravings, you're not putting the logs on the fire, so to speak. Like, you may be eating a lot of healthy fats, and for some reason your body is just not transitioning that to cutting the logs and putting them on the fire. And then that would require you to put something like some kindling on the fire, hence the need for some kind of sweet something to give you some energy right away. Do you remember at all, Gus, what some of the initial suggestions were on, or the take homes that you had when we looked at the genetic component? I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but is there anything that stuck out in terms of, hey, this is what's going on potentially in your body that you had no clue about?
No, I don't remember specifics. That was actually about 2 years ago, or a year and a half
Right. It was,
ago.
yeah. Yeah. It
But I
was,
do
so,
remember
okay. So go ahead. Yeah.
supplements. So you came up with some suggestions based on supplements.
Right.
And again, I'd had a hard time remembering exactly which ones they were, but I noticed when I took them, it was a feeling of like, oh yeah, that fits. It didn't feel overwhelming, but it didn't feel like it felt like it filled a void in my
Right.
life or my day or whatever.
Yeah. So, and usually those will be like based on that. So some people will email me or put a comment to a video and say, hey, what supplements do you recommend? And I'm always adamant about, I don't know, because I don't know you. And I want to make sure that we're making a customized recovery suggestion. And if you're not kicking on your ketones on the fire, then perhaps we're using things like carnitine or things that will help break down your healthy fats a little bit better. But specifically, Gus, one of the findings that we had on your blood work that was in the middle zone, meaning it wasn't high from a lab range, but it was high from a healthy range, was your iron status and how your iron is oxidizing. So give us a little aha or what you've learned about that.
Right. Well, so I think the response to that was I started just giving blood, and I gave blood regularly. There are some supplements I learned. I don't think it was even from you, but I just learned there were some that could help lower that. And I don't know if I took some for a little while. I think curcumin was one of those, but within a very short period of time, it dropped pretty significantly. And, at the same time, as I would give blood, I did feel again a sense of relief. Like it's almost like a weight that you were carrying you're not carrying it anymore. So right. I think as I was going through my recovery process, the ongoing changes that we were making seemed to constantly help get me a little closer to where I needed to be.
Right. And so one of the things, again, looking at your notes, like one of the things that you were telling me is, okay, like I'm feeling better, like generally my energy is getting better, but my brain fog is still foggy, and that's very frustrating for you. So then we go a little bit deeper into either new testing, or we go into reviewing the nutrigenomics again, or very important, which I see a lot of practitioners not do. If you're going to do a test the first time and implement a strategy, it's really important to do a test a second time to see how that strategy is working, to see if you're moving the needle in the right way objectively, because you want to relate that to subjectively. Hey, great, you're feeling 75% better with your energy, but your brain fog's still not working right. And that's what we want to dive into. And one of the things we've noticed, Gus, was some toxic chemicals and exposures. So tell us, because we were talking before we got on here today, how you had these ahas with, the chemicals in the environment and how that impacted you as well to get you to that next level.
Yeah, well, we talked about mold, which was one of the things that showed up, and whether that was so I don't know if this plays into it, but so things like stevia. I don't know if we talked about that one. I this might be even new. So one of the things I was taking was as a supplement, or not as a supplement, but in it, rather than sugar, was stevia. And I was adding it to just about everything, and I never heard stevia could cause any side effects. And I was actually getting very, very sore kidneys as a result of that. I stopped taking it, and it was like one of those symptoms that had been cropping up strangely out of the blue over the last year just kind of went down. We'll probably need to talk about that one more at depth. But so that was in somewhat related to the oxalates. So oxalates are those things that you can eat. They're kind of little shards, I guess, that kind of rub or irritate your body, your muscles and things. And so I was working on that because I felt that as well. And I didn't really feel the withdrawal of the oxalates as much as the stevia. Man, that was just killing me. So, and then in response to that, I think we were looking at maybe having mold issues coming out of that as well. So there's possibility that that's going down. But I've been doing, I think my gut issues, they're still complicated. And I know I had like three or four things, or 3 or 4 different levels of issues there. H. pylori was one, mold. The other one I'm forgetting. Anyway, it's a protozoa or whatever.
Yeah, like parasite.
Yeah, and then parasites. So, like as you're working through that, that's frustrating. That's one of the toughest things I think to have to deal with is cleaning up the gut or getting the gut to work right, and then the brain fog stuff as well. So it's been progress. I feel like things have progressed in that area, but it's definitely feeling slower. It's not as quick. It's somewhat frustrating in some ways too. You wish you could just take a pill and be finished with it, but especially since I think it started about 14 years ago.
Yeah. Well, you listen, a lot of people listening to this will understand and say, yeah, I've had that too, people that prior to working together, they'll tell me they're seeing someone and they're a GI guy, or they're seeing someone and they're a mold person, or they're seeing someone, they're adrenal person. But what they're missing is the fact that the specialists, even in the functional world, just like the traditional world, they tend not to talk to each other. And the body is a generalist. And that's what I think is really important in terms of, it's not so much which one do I do first. It's more so, how do I lower the expenses in the body first? Meaning, like, if you have inflammation and oxidative stress that's going on fundamentally, and it's robbing you of your core minerals and nutrients, then you don't want to embark on a parasite protocol or a heavy metal protocol or whatever protocol until you lower the inflammation per se. That's why it was so key to get you to understand that component of the iron oxidation. One of the other things that we saw too, that you had, which is a genetic susceptibility, meaning we have to chaperone iron in the body effectively, and somewhere along the assembly line, it may not be getting from point A to point B to point C to point E effectively. And we want to help you get to the widget making process very helpful before we embark on something else. But something else we talked to you about, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, was we talked about histamine and how environmentally pets, danders, pollen, stress, your immune system, alcohol, certain foods. Was there any ahas that you had with understanding how histamine was creating that imbalance in your body or creating that inflammation in the body that you had to change around?
Yeah, I tell you, there's been a lot of food changes and variations that have helped. That seems to have been something that I started to incorporate a couple of years ago as well, when we first started kind of keeping track of the foods that I'm allergic to. And I think a lot of the practitioners I've worked with, even prior to you, had some insight to the allergy testing and stuff like that. So I don't remember, what did we do specifically related to the histamines that I can't remember. I'll tell you if that seemed to be effective or not, but
yeah, it was probably the DAO supplement for when you eat foods. Could be one of the main ones that help with clearing out histamine, and also just being aware. I mean, iron oxidation and all the oxalate challenges, all of them lead to the histamine highway road as well. So it really depends on what your unique on-ramps are. So on-ramps could be stress, could be certain foods that are higher in histamine. So fermentable foods can be, alcohol, mold will produce a lot of histamine as well. So it's kind of a combination of everything. If we're talking specifically about a supplement, it probably would have been the DAO supplement. So I don't know if there's any of those that kind of resonated with you, or it was just a combination of everything, Gus?
Yeah, I would say more the combination,
Yeah, for sure. So, and then of course, looking at some of the other things, you're absolutely right. I mean, we looked at your organic acid test, and there were a lot of really high oxalates. So, and you mentioned what those are. They're basically plant-based compounds. Usually they're in spinach or Swiss chard or beets, where there's these little crystals that can form in your tissues, and that can create fatigue, mitochondrial issues where it robs you and chelates your minerals. It can create a lot of pain, a lot of brain fog. I don't remember, was that one of the things that you had a major challenge with musculoskeletal, like fibromyalgia type pains?
I think I was, yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know if we talked about the kidneys being affected. I think that was part of some
Right.
ongoing, especially the right side of my body, the arm, the leg, the toes, kind of everything connected to this axis would get sore. And that started, I'm going to say 4 years ago, 5 years ago, where that just kind of grew worse over time. And again, going to different practitioners, and a lot of guys out there really don't seem like, so if you go to your internet guys, like I would call you an internet guy, you're like a superstar on the internet. and you can just tell there's like the higher game level. You're dealing with a lot of issues in that world where people are very in tune to what's going on, but the local guys, like the local chiropractors and whatnot that I went to really don't get it. And I think for anybody that's out there that's watching this, you got to be careful with, how much you give a local guy that doesn't have, I don't know, a broader perspective about what's going on in the world of alternative health stuff. Because I just don't I feel like they kind of lose the edge. They're not really keeping in touch with what's going on, cutting edge stuff, or the general philosophy about how all this stuff is connected. I think they'll get there, but it's just, there's a learning curve and everybody's kind of learning. And so it takes a while for it to diffuse through the broader population. So a lot of the issues I was trying to deal with local guys, I really felt like you just got nowhere. Here, take this supplement, and you just know immediately if it would work or not. Like nothing would happen. You're like, yeah, that guy just was guessing.
Right. Well, I mean, it speaks to you too, though. And I think that's important. I mean, what we're talking about is complicated stuff. Like I always am amazed that the people that I see that seek out not the local provider, but say the internet person, they're on their game. I remember a mentor of mine told me, like, if you're going to play at this level, you got to know your stuff, because your clients are going to know their stuff better than you're going to know their stuff. And I didn't want to be that doctor that so many people that I see tell me, yeah, I knew more about, my body than the doctor did. And that happens a lot. So kudos to you for knowing, like, and the other day, like literally you did make me get goosebumps when you told me, like, it's so rewarding to be able to, go on the bike ride with my daughter. And it's so rewarding to be able to do these things. So kudos to you for having the perseverance and the skill set to apply and implement what we recommended. So a lot of the questions we get to, though, is sometimes it can be cumbersome or daunting because you have to have a special diet. You're on 1,001 different supplements. Tell me about that aspect. How did you manage to be a father of five? Like, I always joke around, I know why we're on the call, why you're burnt out and tired. You don't have to tell me anymore. You got 5 kids, right? So, but how did you manage to be a working dad, a spouse, someone that has health challenges and has all these different things? Yeah. How did you manage that?
Well, and just so your audience knows, I turned 52 this last March, so I'm no spring chicken either. And I started late in life. So a lot of what I wanted in life, I kind of had put off. And so I didn't get married until I was like 36. And so having 5 kids in a really short period of time, I think it was under 10 years, so about 7 to 8 years. And one of my goals is just to be there for, you know what I mean? And to raise them so that they're healthy, productive individuals in the world. And so I've had a strong background. My background is actually, I was pre-med as an undergrad. So I was in the medical school system in St. Louis, and then I didn't go. I ended up not going to medical school, but I always had a passion for nutritional type stuff. And that really grew once the internet came along. So I was pre-internet, a lot of my early education was prior to the internet. But as I started learning about alternative health, I really got excited about health again, whereas medicine, I could tell, and this is, I think we haven't really even talked about the medical providers out there. which, honestly, I still don't think they deal with about 5% of the problem in the world. They just throw drugs at symptoms and forget whatever else is going on. So if anybody's out there trying to figure out if they should get into alternative health, I'd say, definitely the more you can abandon your medical doctor, this is me saying it, not Joel, but the more you can abandon your medical doctor, the better, because it sort of forces you to solve problems and really solve them. Because if you don't get better with alternative health, you're going to not feel different because you're not going to treat that symptom. And so that was one thing that I still really believe that, like I really have to stay on. It's kind of like an exercise program. You just have to do it regularly. If you want to stay healthy, you gotta keep looking for what's going on in your world and your health. So that's one of my underlying philosophies. And that's why I'm probably not the easiest patient to have, because I'm a bit of a biohacker. I'll just kind of give me this and then I'll try that. Like I'll just kind of veer off the path really quick because I heard something was good. But I really feel like you gotta listen to people who know what they're doing, that have insights, that have bigger exposures, and it's complicated. It's such a complicated world to understand all the things that can affect your health, and without seeing that bigger picture and then going in on the small things, you're just not going to make progress. And so, yeah, and I still feel like, and I think budget is a big part of it. I really wish more of the tests were, like it would be so nice if you didn't have to fork over a couple $1,000s to get like everything you need and be able to do that more often. So I'm hoping that changes more in the future as well, because I feel like that's one thing that holds people back. I remember one of my first,
For sure.
yeah, one of the first guys, it was long before I talked to you, but I'd reached out to somebody else, and I think I was looking at about $6,000 worth of tests, and I didn't have the money. I'm a young, well, I'm not so young, but I'm a dad that has a bunch of young kids. I don't have a ton of savings. I can't afford that much money, And it wasn't like I could do this one or this one. I had to do them all. And so I ended up going with somebody else because they were willing to do more piecemeal testing. And again, I don't know if that was a good idea or not, but it was all I could do, So that's one of the frustrations, I think, is that the world of testing still hasn't gotten to the point where it's super affordable yet. Although I think it's getting more affordable. I think they're getting better tests for the same price, but it would be nice to see that innovate fast.
A couple great things you said there, and I just want to repeat them. The first one is no one's going to care as much about you getting healthy as you, right? So you're going to have to be your best advocate. And a lot of the clients that are potentially exhausted and strapped because they can't work at full capacity, or they've already spent a lot of money, or they have 5 kids, or all of the above, they go to their primary doctor and they want their doctor to give them more than 10, 15 minutes. So they've had to, do the searching on their own. So it becomes a bit of a catch-22, but you do have to be your biggest advocate. I do agree with you. And I think it is getting better in terms of the traditional approaches or the allopathic medicine, or how much money you spend on healthcare for your insurance on a monthly basis should cover more of the fundamental testing. So I do see that happen. I do see that improving. I always like to know though, because I want the clients that we work with to think of it as an investment, right? I mean, you really do have to think of it as an investment in terms of, well, first and foremost, how much is it costing you to be sick? I think a lot of people don't, I took out my mic. I think a lot of people don't realize that, sorry, I don't know which one I'm on. I need to plug in my computer because it's going to die on me here, but I want to make sure I know which one I'm plugging in here. All right. So I think that a person has to figure out how much is this truly impacting me financially. Like if I can't work a full day, if I can't advance, if I have to miss days, if I have to turn down projects, there's a cost there. If I have to, they take $300 or $400 out of my paycheck to pay for my insurance, there's a cost there. There's a cost in terms of the testing, that your co-payments or your supplements. So I really always want someone to have those smelling salts under their nose in terms of, well, how much, even though you're going to see your primary and most of that is covered, what's the impact on you financially, right? So what made you make that decision? Like, would you say like that there has been a return in terms of if you have a higher quality of health, that you can do more projects as an architect, or you could
Right.
do, yeah, tell me about that aspect.
Well, this year was different in that I think we hit some financial goals that were really helpful to hit. You know, I had a new business that in the last 8 years or 10 years, I've started 2 new businesses. And so whenever you start a new business, you pretty much go back to barely making it, you know, and it wasn't a big choice to start the second business. It sort of had to happen. And so that reset kind of hit maturity about last year. And so I'm at that stage where I decided to invest in feeling better, because, you know, like you said, if I'm not healthy, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to be doing the work, or I'm not going to be doing a good job anyway. And again, if I can work another 15, 20 years, which that's my goal, is probably work into my 80s, I've got the kind of business where I can continue to do that. But if I'm not healthy enough to do it, then that's a big loss. And so it's better to spend the time and energy now and figure out what's wrong and get on a better track. Absolutely. Than to suffer through. Or if you go the medical route, odds are you're going to live a very short life and be very sick. I've seen my friends die. I've seen friends die going to doctors, getting pills, you know, and they're not with me anymore, you know. So it's sad to see that, you know, and I warned them. I tried to warn them. Right? So.
Yeah, you know, I used to do in-office workshops, and I remember a mentor of mine had a really great soundbite that I would always use. And like, okay, well, you get insurance, and insurance is covered, and if it's not covered, I can't see you. And that's like saying, well, imagine you had like a diner pass to a restaurant that it was paid for, but every time you went, it made you sick. Like, just because it's covered doesn't mean that you should go and do it.
Don't eat there.
But to their
Don't eat
defense,
there.
though, I do feel that people do want to make that investment and have made that investment, but then they were left with no results, right? Because they, you know, so how, I don't know, just from your side of you alluded to it earlier, how do they avoid that? Like, okay, I'm willing to spend, but I've done 4 doctors and no one's
But I've been telling people I know, especially those that are already investing in testing and other things. I've been telling them to just bring your tests and call you, you know, like get started with somebody that can piece the pieces together, you know, like, and maybe they're missing a test or 2, but they can start. And I think that's what I did with you, is I just kind of brought a lot of the tests I had. You've got a ton of them there, and you can kind of look back over time going, well, this issue was already, you know, already a problem 10 years ago, right, as opposed to, you know, so right. I think that's helpful. And I think it's a good way for people to get started with a little better care, you know. But again, there's no knock on the alternative world out there. It's just really, I don't think there's any cohesive sort of like, okay, we're all on, you know, the same team. Everybody's kind of working towards maybe understanding these things. And that's why I like the internet doctors, you know, the YouTube doctors are like, you're in this world where the ideas are flying fast. I mean, it's amazing how a new idea will spread through this culture, and we seem to go, okay, that works, that doesn't work, or let's change this, let's add this. And I really I've seen a lot of changes over the last 10 years, a lot of changes.
Yeah, those are great points in terms of a lot of the clients that I can give them the best insight on is it's there in plain eyesight from their old test that they didn't get told about. And that's a shame, because like for you again, and it's not always about high iron, but if your iron isn't moving, and for example, if your iron's 255, your ferritin's 255, and on the lab range it shows 30 to 390, you're being told it's normal. But if you know, we don't like to see with new research it be above 75. A lot of doctors don't have that on their radar, and I can look at a test in 216 that you showed me and it shows 270, and that's high, and that's something you can do right away. So those are the things that I would urge other people looking for support is, have someone really go through your past blood work from a healthy range, because you'll probably see some outliers. I'll give you an example. One time I had a client who, she was really sick, and I asked her, she had hepatitis antibodies, and I asked them about them, what did the doctor say? Because I combed through all their blood work, and I'm like, oh, like, what did they say about this? And like, they didn't say anything about it. And then I asked them, well, go ask them what they say about that. And they said, oh, it's a past exposure. And because it's what they think of as IgG, which IgG antibody is typically assumed to be a past exposure. But new research shows that if they're extremely high, like 3 times the range, those past exposures can reactivate. So anyways, bottom line is that one of the ways that a person could hack their way into seeing some outliers that can make huge differences, so that the skepticism of investing in a new doctor, and it doesn't have to be me, but a new doctor that can give them some insights right away, is have them go through your past blood work and see if there's anything there that can move the needle based on what they thought of. And
Sure.
iron, I assume iron until proven otherwise, for sure. So that's a really important point that you mentioned, I think, for sure. And also being an advocate. So now let's tell us, maybe like fast forward to where we are now. You did mention you have more energy, but what are some of the other things that you're noticing that maybe may have you took for granted? You say like, oh, I forgot that I wasn't sleeping. It's funny how that works,
Well, this morning, it was a great example of this morning. 7 o'clock rolled around, and I do have an alarm set, but I can't tell you how many times I'm up working when that alarm goes off, and I just have to turn it off because I'm already been awake for an hour or two. But even in the last week or so, it's improving such that I'm starting to bump into that alarm in bed. I'm in bed either sleeping or I'm just not awake yet, and it goes off, and I'm like, that's different, like I'm just grateful to be still sleeping in bed at that time.
Right.
And I've noticed that shifts too with just having a longer day. So I'm not exhausted and anymore. It used to be 4, but I mean, originally it used to be 4. And then I'd say over the last 3-4 months, it's shifted gradually to 7 or 8. And now it's getting closer to 9. So it's like my day is getting longer. And that just opens up all kinds of things, because, when you get home from work or you're done with work, there's still a lot of time left to invest in the kids, or the family. And, they can get robbed of all that. So I've been just in the last few weeks so my son's taking basketball. I've been going up with him, and I'm not ready to coach or anything, but I want to just hang out with the guys while they're playing basketball. Or I took my daughter on a couple of bike rides here in the last few weeks, or last week or so, and she would go on one every day, I think, if I took her. Jogging more. So the physical activity is certainly there. And I feel like I'm starting to, again, I was plateaued or stuck at a certain weight range. And I feel like that's kind of going down a little bit as well. It's a little easier to get some of that weight off. So, and I'm not overweight, but I just want to drop about 5 to 10, maybe 10 pounds, but mostly 5. But yeah, just because you're kind of stuck in that metabolic, like almost a metabolic frozen state where your body will not, burn its own fat reserves.
Yeah, those are good results. The other thing too, I just got reminded of, like, we had a little, I won't say a crisis call, but there was not too long ago where, with elections and internet, and you were just being run ragged with your thought process. And I think lifestyle wise, I encouraging you, okay, we need to contain how much variables we're processing. So any ahas you had with that? Know thyself.
Big ones. So stress has a huge impact on your ability to, I don't know if your metabolic activity or your body's ability to sort of switch into another state. So, and I'm no expert in the parasympathetic nervous system or the sympathetic nervous system, but I thought heart issues for about a month or two. And I went to a guy here in town, he does a little heart check, and he's like, it's fine. I'm like, it just doesn't feel right. And I wasn't sleeping very well at all. And so my pulse was really high, kind of intermittently high. And with COVID around, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff you could blame on COVID, but I'm not sure it was COVID. And one of the guys is another internet guy that just talked about how to relax and lower your pulse, and it was a breathing exercise. So I decided to give up all news, like 100%, and it must have been a month or two. I did no news, and then I started doing these one night I started doing a breathing exercise. I fell asleep during the exercise, and I didn't wake up until let's say 6 in the morning, and I hadn't slept in a few weeks, and it was just amazing. And I repeated that night after night, and that's still a good habit for me. Is when I feel like my chest is tight, or I'm like, I'm not thinking well, I just start breathing, purposefully. I think they do it the 4 square, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4, and it really does help calm you down. So yeah, you could probably talk more about the parasympathetics and all that.
Listen, that's awesome. That, I think probably more so than anything was shutting off the news, because it's just, it's sensational, and it's designed to, get viewers to watch it. And there's a whole slippery slope there in terms of who owns the news station and the biased information but it's polarizing, especially in today's day and age. And if you're
and there's no shock absorber out there. So the news happens so fast. So it's like you're literally in the middle of a battle, and the bullets are flying everywhere. And so if you get away from it, maybe the war is going on, you'll hear about something, but you don't have to be involved in every skirmish, which is hard.
That's a good point. But I think also too, the proactive and the synergistic, it's not just one thing, it's everything. It's your ability to identify foods that contribute to your oxalate levels, and to be able to lower your ferritin and your iron, and to be able to make sure that you're supporting histamine levels, and to turn off the news, and to breathe better, and to get involved with your daughter's activities. I mean, it's not one of them, Gus, it's all of them. And I think success leaves clues. And that's why you're seeing such important improvements in your health. And I'm sure you would say, like, it's not like, okay, I fixed it and that's it, that's all. Yeah. Now it's a verb, right? I mean, speak maybe a little bit of that, like how now it's like you always just got to know yourself and where you are, finger on the pulse, and make sure that you're keeping an eye on the dashboard, right?
Yeah. And that's why, meeting regularly with you or a practitioner is really helpful. Ongoing tests, goals, keeping those in mind. I think it's good. At some point, maybe I would have, the better you feel, maybe the more regular you get. But if I get out of that rhythm or something happens, I definitely want to up my game again. So I would say keeping healthy is a lot of things, a lot of good disciplines, whether it's eating a certain way or like you were saying about the breathing, the news, your hobbies, the stress in your world, all that goes into it. It's tough to have all of the things clicking at the same time, but you got to work towards that.
Yeah. And you got to know, like, you have tools in your toolkit. Even I've suffered with my own exhaustion and fatigue, and I have iron issues. And if I'm not careful if I'm eating too much protein and too much iron-based foods, if I'm watching too much news, if I'm staying up too late, even I'll have my crashes. And then sometimes we see that next shiny object and we want to employ that, and we forget the basics and what we need to do to get to where we got to, and we took it for granted, and we're human. But as long as now you have a skill set of tools and when to use them and when not to use them, I think that's really what the teaching of healthcare should be, in terms of know your body, know your stressors, know your weak links, and constantly tweak it so that you're walking that fine line and you're in that Goldilocks zone of not too little, not too much. And that's really what takes the time to figure out. But I think you've done a great job with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. And you're a big part of that.
No, listen, I always tell people I'm just like, it's me being a soundboard for you so that you can kind of hear yourself think and answer your own questions. There was a movie that was one of my favorite movies out there. It's called Mumford. I don't know if you ever saw it, but this guy was a psychologist, but he really wasn't a psychologist. He was a fraud, and they found him on like FBI's like not most wanted, but he was like one of those guys, and he was such an amazing psychologist, even though he didn't have training. And the reason why he was is because he just kind of let the person talk and hear themselves, you know. And it was a good movie. So, any last words? Like, I know if someone's skeptical of, you know, making that next decision of working not just with me, but a practitioner in general, any words that you would help get them over the hump if they didn't feel they could get better, or they've tried everything and nothing works, or it's too much money, or all of the above excuses? What would you say to them?
You know, you do have to eventually, you know, kind of face the music. Like, it could get worse, you know. Like, sometimes the biggest motivation is that, you know, like, not doing something is a penalty. You do suffer. Like, I could feel that sort of the time was winding shorter, you know, like I was doing worse, and I had that feeling of like, if I don't change, I could, I would say, die early, but I think that's really what it was coming down to. And so I would say it's the carrot or the stick, you know, and to me, sometimes the stick is a pretty good motivation, you know, like, I got to do something, you know, and at some point I have to take a chance with somebody, you know. I can't just not do something. And, like, you know, there's not a, on the internet world, it's fun. You can do a lot of pre-interviewing of people by watching videos, you know, or if you know somebody. You can't do that so much in the real world with, I would say the real world, but your locals, you know, with chiropractors and, you know, functional diagnostic people. You hear word of mouth, but it's tough. But I would say, you know, don't wait too long. You know, do something before it's too late.
Yeah, no decision is still a decision. I agree with you 100%. And I think also too, like, just take that first step. You know, all these analogies, like you eat an elephant one bite at a time, or, you know, like make that first step, because ultimately when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I think that that rings true with you in terms of you had seen people that took you only so far, and you didn't make the decision of this isn't going to work for me, or life's not fair, or nothing ever, you know, works in my favor. And whatever decision to not make a decision is, you knew like, okay, like I have 5 kids and I have a lot of second half of my life to live here, and it's worth it. So I think there's a lot of success in my healthy recovery clients. Is those are the consistent things that I see. And that's the glue. That's not, you're not going to find that in the supplement bottle, right? I mean, which supplement bottle do you have that gives you that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, none. There are none. So that's good.
Yeah, no, listen, I appreciate your time. Again, it truly is rewarding for me as a provider to have someone have these impacts of their life, because the quality of life, I mean, there really is no value you can place on that, even though you can place on how much it costs to not be healthy. You can't really put a value on, like, what's the return of investment on you having to work into your 80s, and to be able to have a full day, and to be able to know like your daughter wants to continue to ride her bike with you and stuff. I mean, there's no value on that. So yeah, thank you so much, Gus. I appreciate your time, and hopefully this encourages whoever's listening to take that next step for themselves. And again, not with me, with someone, so that you can get your health back. But I appreciate the time that you gave us today.
You bet.